All right, so right now I want to talk about death, and in particular, how our society and culture today resists it so much. The Buddha said that old age, sickness, and death are a part of life, an inevitable part of life. We cannot avoid them. If we get old enough, sickness and death are on the way. Death is inevitable. So, when we see things like this, it seems to be a naive and honestly an immature view to resist them. Death, sickness. Instead, we can grow up and look these things in the eyes to understand, what is this thing called death? What is sickness? What does it mean to lose my physical and maybe my mental faculties in this life? Am I okay with that? Because we see that our experience of problems, our experience of suffering is dependent on our relationship to events. And when there is a beginning, there is an ending. And if we are resisting the end, we are fabricating an experience of suffering for ourselves. So in our culture, we can see that we are resisting death. We don't want to look at it. We glamorize youth and we resist the elders in our culture, while other cultures do not do that and thus have a different relationship with death and old age. But when we resist death and sickness and put it in a corner, lock it in the closet, then we actually create fear because we don't have a relationship and a familiarity with these things. Thus it's the unknown, and the mind just spins these webs of who knows what that is. Probably worst case scenario. That's what the mind says. It's not fact. And if we just give these things the attention that they deserve, we can start to build a relationship to them, an intimacy with them. And we can actually change how we experience these things. So, related to our culture's inability to be with death is our cultural and individual inability to be with discomfort in our own bodies. So, for instance, when you think about sickness and death, what arises in the body? Maybe some contractions, maybe fear, grief, sadness, energy moving when we're realizing that this has to end. This body has to go, this mind has to go, this whole thing has to end someday, in a sense. It's not the full picture, but... So, if we can feel into those things, feel into these experiences, then we can start to gain a resilience and not resist them as much, and thus gain skill in being with these things. And through that being with the somatic experience and the fear and the grief that may come up, we can start to become intimate and related in a relationship with this thing called death or sickness, just discomfort in the future. And when we do this, things start to soften. And when things start to soften, the fear-based contractions that solidify our experience of death, our understanding of it is solidified and contracted through fear. When we can become intimate with these things, the fear can loosen. And this idea that has become solidified can also loosen. And we can start to see the holes and the assumptions that we have about death. See how it's not something as solid as we thought. And then we can start to question those assumptions. So again, by relaxing into our conceptual experience and our somatic experience of death, we can begin to loosen that conceptual experience and somatic experience. And through this loosening, we can start to gain insights into what this thing called death is and our relationship to it, as far as just something to push away. Whereas if we become intimate with this, then we see it's something to embrace, something to remember, something to bring into our awareness regularly, because it enriches our lives. It doesn't detract from it, actually. It's like wildflower season in the mountains out here in Colorado. If it happened all the time, it would be kind of meaningless. It's a fact that only lasts for a couple weeks that makes it so amazing. That's what this life is. It's the brevity of it, the ephemeral nature of this life that makes it so special and worth living and being in. And also through our familiarity with death and the loosening of it, we can start to deconstruct the culturally conditioned narrative of what death is and start to replace it with something that is more skillful, expansive, beautiful, resonant, and rich, instead of something that's contracted and based in fear. Also, we can start to step towards a deeper truth, which is seeing beyond death. Because in a sense, this mind and body will die, but that's not the full story. That's only part of it. When we become intimate with death, we actually see that death is not the end. We can see what I am actually extends beyond this body to everything that is. And what I am exists in the trees, the clouds, the rivers, in the kids running around, in the numerous generations that are to come, the squirrels in the trees, the birds, you name it, that's you. The same seer that has seen my life through my eyes, all of my experiences, the same seer that has seen your life through your eyes and all of your experiences. Same with every being in the past and every being in the future. And in that sense, what you are could never die. It's kind of a paradox. You both cannot end death, and at the same time, you could never die, because what you are was never really born in the same way. And this points to a quote from the Heart Sutra, one of the most famous sutras in Buddhism, which has a verse that says, "There is no end to old age, birth, and death. And also, there is no old age, birth, and death." How can it be both? I'll make a video on this in the future, but the closer you get to deep truths about the absolute and the relative, the more that the conceptual mind kind of falls away and you have to step into embracing paradox, because it's both. There's nothing you can do to stop this thing called death. And simultaneously, what you are could never die. So, thank you.